Thanks for joining us. I'm Diane Rehm. Legendary singer-songwriter Judy Collins' musical career spans 5 decades. She's best known for chart-topping hits like Both Sides Now and Send in the Clowns. Her landmark 1967 album, Wildflowers, is in the Grammy Hall of Fame. Collins still plays more than 100 live shows every year. She's just released a new album titled Strangers Again. It's a collection of duets with Jackson Browne, Willie Nelson, Michael McDonald, and others. The album just hit #1 on Amazon's music charts, and Judy Collins joins me in the studio. You are, of course, welcome to join us. Call us on 800-433-8850. Send us an email to drshow@wamu.org. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter. Judy Collins, I can't tell you how great it is to see you again.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
You look just wonderful.
Well, and so do you.
Gorgeous blue silk outfit, which people can see because we are live video streaming this.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So they can see your beautiful white hair. They can see your beautiful blue dress. So I am so delighted.
Oh, me too. I've always loved your show. I love you. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time,
as I said,
Judy.
We stay at it and we work like hell. You know?
That's exactly right. Talk about this new album and how you selected the people with whom you wanted to sing duets.
Oh, it's been so exciting. This has been such a treat. I found this song called Strangers Again, which is written by Ari Hess and sung by him with me. And Ari's a wonderful young singer-songwriter who's been on my shows, a number of my shows over the past 3 or 4 years. And I've recorded with him before on my Irish show at the Dromoland Castle in Ireland a couple of years ago. That's a PBS special. So I went back through his material and I found this song, Strangers Again. And I said to him, this is the kind of song that Diana Ross should have recorded, but I'm going to record it. And then I had to build something to get this song out. And so I called a bunch of my friends, and starting with the great Jackson Browne, the great Willie Nelson, Michael McDonald. I called up Glenn Hansard, Don McLean,
and Ari Hess.
Long before we ever touched, long before we knew too much, I wish we were strangers again.
Long before we ever kissed, long before I ever missed you, I wish we were strangers again. I want yesterday to come back again. Nothing is as simple as I once knew. Like everything in the way it was before today that I lost you.
So, Judy, clearly, his voice and yours blending very well, and that had to be one of the reasons you made these various selections.
Oh, absolutely. When I called up, talked to Don McLean, I'd been doing some concerts with him, and he said, I said, what would you do if you were going to sing a song with me? And he said, well, I would sing Send in the Clowns with you. What do you think? He said, you're probably laughing. And I said, well, I'm not laughing. And of course, it turned out to be a spectacular version. When I met Jimmy Buffett recently, it's funny, Jimmy and I hadn't known each other, and we met at a party last summer. And he said, I told him about the project, among other things. We had a great talk about history and the places we've been and so many people we know. And he said, well, I've had a dream my whole professional life of singing Someday Soon with you. So let me do that.
How wonderful. Oh, that's just great.
Yeah, I wish we were strangers.
I wish we were strangers.
Just a wonderful song.
Isn't it
I
lovely?
wish we were strangers.
Yes.
Again, meeting for the first time. I must say, the idea of you and your wonderful voice pairing up with all these different voices, did you have any hesitation?
No, I had none. I had none because the people I picked are so, first of all, they're so professional. They're such good guys, every single one of them. I had not known a couple of them well, but some of them I knew over the years. It was a pleasure to talk to them, to get to spend time with them, and then you talk about all sorts of things, not just the music.
How long did it take you to complete the album?
Well, it's been about an 18-month process. That's about normal. You think of it, you get it together, you figure out what you really want to sing, and then you start talking to people about it and give them choices or not. Sometimes I would present a couple songs that I thought might work, and then, well, in the case of Jeff Bridges, now I was surprised because he said, "No, I want to sing a song with you called Make Our Garden Grow," which is from Candide. Well, I never heard it, so there was an education for me because I listened to Candide, of course, love it a lot, but all of it was a pleasure. Very exciting, and to work at a very high level with people who work at a very high level.
I want to hear a little of that duet with Jeff Bridges.
Mm.
We've got
Such
them
fun.
all. Yeah.
You've been a fool, and so have I, but come, I'll be your wife.
And let us try before we die to make some sense of life.
We're neither pure nor wise nor good.
We'll do the best we know.
We'll build our house and chop our wood and make our garden grow, and make our garden grow.
I can see you're almost there, back in the studio.
Yes, it was great fun. And he's such a doll. He's such a kind and loving man. He has a foundation. He chose this song. I thought, he'll want to sing Crazy Heart with me. And when he chose this song, he also told me that he has a foundation that raises money to feed children in the United States.
Huh.
Not in other parts of the world. He says, there's a huge population of children who are in poverty and who are hungry. And this is the song he sort of uses in his concerts to help draw people's attention to this problem.
Isn't that wonderful?
So I
must say.
think I love Jeff Bridges, and I think he's doing humanitarian work as well as being a great singer artist. He has an album out now called with his group called The Abiders, and he sings. I went to see him in Ridgefield at a concert of his, and he has a wonderful band, wonderful group that
How
plays
long
with
have
him.
you known him?
Well, I knew him at the beginning because he was in a movie with an old lover of mine, Stacy Keach, whose brother, Jim, produced a movie called The Long Riders about Jesse. And the brothers were all in it, the Bridges, the Keaches, and the Carradines. So I met them all 40 years ago.
Judy Collins, and we're talking about a whole range of issues, hearing music from her new album. We'll also hear some old favorites, singles of Judy's. Take your calls. We've got a lot to do in this
Yes,
hour.
we do.
Stay with us.
Yes.
And it's such a pleasure to have her here in the studio. If you'd like to join us, 800-433-8850. You know, you said at the beginning of the show, it's luck and it's work like hell.
Yeah.
You've got a very, very strong work ethic. Talk about that and where it came from.
Well, I think it all started in my family with my dad. He's extremely successful at what he did. He had a radio show for 30 years. He never missed a date, never missed a broadcast, always woke up happy every morning singing, no matter how drunk he was the night before, by the way. I mean, it was type A all the way, and he expected a lot of his kids. And I, of course, started playing the piano and becoming a musician when I was 4 or 5 years old. So I was very trained. I have a friend who says she was trained rather than raised, and that was certainly true for me.
What about your mom?
My mother was amazing. You know, she raised 5 kids. She died at 94 with with 5 children and a lot of grandkids and a lot of joy in her life. And she was amazing and smart and well read, and had a book club that read everything, including all of Faust, which I was so jealous of. She was an amazing woman, and she really supported my father. I mean, you can't raise kids. My father was blind, which was not an issue. I mean, he that was the least of his problems.
What,
In a way,
was he blind from birth?
he was blind from about 4 years old.
I see.
But he had been well trained and well brought up and well schooled in how to deal with that. He used to say, well, it has its advantages, like I can read in the dark. So he took his work seriously. He took raising his kids seriously. He took getting us to be readers and exposing us to literature and to his ideals, which were absolutely liberal, absolutely Democrat.
And yet here he was, an alcoholic.
And he was up against a demon that he didn't have any understanding of course. Nobody did in those years. And so he was struggling with this. And, this is something that people get in their DNA and in their genetic pool. And sometimes it blossoms into a real illness, as it did with me. And sometimes it doesn't. It's sort of the luck of the draw, I think.
How long did it grab hold of you?
Long enough to nearly kill me. And I was, as I was trained to be, I never missed a show. Until the very last year. And that was 1977. I missed everything. Everything you name it, I missed it. Because of the drinking. And so I was very fortunate because I got into treatment in 78 and have been sober ever since. Thank you, God.
Thank you, God.
I just am so grateful.
What about smoking? Did that go along with it?
I smoked and I quit smoking in 1970. Hardest thing I ever did. But including stopping drinking, even harder even harder. I just think smoking is, I once said to somebody, why isn't smoking up there why aren't there just as many recovery programs for smoking as there are for alcohol or food or what? And a friend of mine who's a physician said, well, I think it's not a spiritual problem. I don't think that's correct. I think it is a spiritual problem, just like all addictions are truly.
Your mother, I gather, did not suffer.
No, she didn't. Well, she was one of those people that, she could have a cigarette on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
And a drink.
Yeah.
Well, she drank wine, actually, but she could have a cigarette and then never smoke for another year.
How did she put up with your father?
Not very well. Not very well. She had a hard time, but she somehow... I always thought, well, after last night and that terrible argument, she'll probably be leaving. She did once leave. We were in Denver, and he had some kind of they'd had an incident, and she picked us all up, and she took us all to the park. That was the thing she would do. She'd take us to the park in Denver, and we'd all look at the zoo. We'd go to the zoo and look at all the animals for a few hours, and then we'd go home. And by that time, he was fine. So he could be a problem. But the main thing was, when he was sober, he was wonderful, and he was a wonderful person and a smart and a funny and an interesting person, and people adored him. And he was just, he had the luck of the Irish. He had the drinking problem.
Did he do his radio show by use of Braille?
Yes. He always wrote his script in Braille, and he typed it for his engineer.
How wonderful.
So, and I never learned Braille. I mean, I thought, I don't need to do that. But then he read out loud to us always. He had these big Braille books. He'd get them from the Library of Congress, and they'd go right up the wall. They were stacked. You know how a Braille book is huge. It takes like 15 feet to get Moby Dick into all of the books that it takes.
Judy, when did you actually begin drinking?
Oh, 15, I think. I think I must have been 15. I drank for about 23 years. I figured it out. And it was always my go-to place. It was, as I say, it was an addiction, and I got into it. But I was always looking and trying to find solutions. I got into therapy very early. I was in therapy for years. I was always hunting for solutions, reading books, going to EST, going to various programs, doing yoga, finding priests, going to see the Maharishi. Anything I could do to try to get over this, I tried.
What finally triggered
Uh, near death, I think. I just had it. I was finished. And I was fortunate because I found a doctor who said, well, I know what's wrong. I thought I was crazy. Most of these years I just thought, well, I'll wind up in an institution somewhere. He said, well, you could use the great Dr. Gitlow from New York. He was a friend of alcoholics and somebody who really understood the disease. He said, I know what's wrong with you. All you need is to get sober, and I can show you what to do. And he sent me to a treatment center, and my life totally changed.
And that was it.
Yeah, that was it.
I'm so glad for you.
Oh, I'm so glad for me too.
There is a song here, one of my favorites, Send in the Clowns, with Don McLean. What did he say when you said you wanted to sing this with him?
He said, I'd love it. Let's see what we can do.
Isn't it rich? Are we a pair? Me here at last on the ground, you in midair. Where are the clowns?
Isn't it bliss? Don't you approve? One who keeps tearing around, one who can't move. Where are the clowns? Send in the clowns. Just when I'd stopped opening doors, finally knowing the one that I wanted was yours.
Making my entrance again with my usual flair.
Sure of my line, no one is there. Don't you love farce? My fault I feel. I thought that you want what I want. Sorry, my dear. But where are the clowns?
Quick, send in the clowns.
Don't bother, they're here.
Judy, that harmony and
Something.
the instrumentalists in the background, the cello.
Yes.
Talk about.
I'm so lucky to have this great group of people. My musical director, Russell Walden, who orchestrated this with a slight difference in the melody in the middle. He's a brilliant. He did the whole album, of course. And the cellist on this is Yoed Mir, wonderful young man that we've worked with a lot over the years. He played on my Metropolitan Museum concert. He played, it was in the Temple of Dender. It was also for PBS. And the other musicians on this album were Jerry Leonard and Doug Yule and Zev Katz, my old friend I've worked with so much, playing the bass, and Robbie Condor, who's a great player of the keyboard. So it was a beautiful, beautiful ensemble.
I had to hear that very last
Yeah,
note.
that very last note.
Just
Yeah,
had to.
that's a great song. Sondheim is such a great writer.
Judy, how do you keep your voice in such gorgeous shape?
Well, I'm lucky. I'm very healthy. I don't smoke or I don't drink. I don't scream. I don't go to ball games and, hoop and holler. I suppose that's part of it. I also had a great teacher for many years. I studied with him for 32 years, actually, through thick and thin, through the before, during, and after.
Really?
And I got lucky because he was such a genius. And I learned to do a few things simple. They're simple things.
Such as
Working like hell for 32 years to figure out how to do it. Simple things are supposed to be simple, and they are simple, but they take a long time to get to sometimes. And what he taught was something called the Bel Canto Method, which means two things. He said when he was dying, he said to me, I went to see him just before he died in the hospital, and he said, now don't worry. All you have to think about is clarity and phrasing. I said, well, that's it.
That's it. I mean,
you don't
really?
sing through your nose or your forehead or your throat, or you don't concentrate. He said, all you have to do, it's like Wayne Dyer had it always, who died recently, unfortunately, always talked about intention. And I suppose that what I learned was intention. I think intention is very important. What do you intend to do with the song? What do you intend to say? Do you intend to make it clear and understandable? And is it phrased in a way? Sometimes the phrasing can be the last thing people think about. When I'm trying to memorize something, like I sang for the Washington ball team yesterday and Nationals, and I sang the great Star Spangled Banner. It's a song that we all know really well, but I was focusing on I was listening and thinking about, because you have to sing it without lyrics out there. I'm scared to death. I'm more nervous about that than singing at Carnegie Hall. And so I was thinking about the phrasing and the way the poetry works. That's what I guess I always have to do to get the song down. I have to think about the meaning.
And you're listening to the Diane Rehm Show. We've got lots of colors. Let's go to the phones. 800-433-8850. First to Charlotte, North Carolina. Carl, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning.
Hi.
Hi there.
I have a story to tell, and I bet Judy is not aware of this. I was a senior in high school in 1972, and I think lasers were just kind of making their way on the scene. So we had a presentation and assembly on the various things that lasers are capable of.
Oh.
And one of the things that they did was that they played some songs. They played Barbra Streisand, Frank Sinatra, a few others that I can't remember. And they ran the songs through the laser, and they projected the image up on a screen in a kind of horizontal red line. All of the singers, Barbra Streisand, Frank Sinatra, their red laser lines all looked a bit like small ocean waves, where their voice kind of went up or down off the line.
Okay.
But the fellow that put on the presentation said that Judy Collins had the most perfect human voice, and to prove it, he played one of her songs, and unfortunately, I don't remember the song.
You only remember the red line, right?
The horizontal
How
line.
about that, Judy?
That's an amazing story.
Had you ever heard anything like that before?
Well, I know it's true because I know that that's what I learned to do. But I mean, I know that there has to do everything. I visited Cleo Lane in England, and she has a theater called the Stables. I'm going to be there in October, actually. She is a wonderful singer, and she said that her husband, John Dankworth, who was the flautist, I believe she was married to him, anyway, that he kept saying to her, now, if you get a wobble, you have to stop singing. And she said to me after I sang there a couple of years ago, she said, you don't have a wobble. So, so you can go on singing.
I guess I would have had to give up the radio a long time
Well,
ago.
see, it does, but the thing about it is that it doesn't really matter because, for instance, in your case, your phrasing and your diction and your beauty and your speech is what makes sense out of what you do, and you are amazing. And in the case of for instance, he was talking about the wobble that Sinatra has. Well, we used to listen to Sinatra for his phrasing. It's all about phrasing. It's all about phrasing and clarity so that we know what you're saying. There's never a problem with that. Somebody said that, singing is like praying, and I think it does come close to the spiritual, don't you?
I do indeed. Judy Collins, you'll hear more when we come back. Stay with us.
Honey, tell me how's your appetite?
And welcome back. Judy Collins is here. We've got her brand new album, Strangers Again. She sings duets with people like Ari Hess, Michael McDonald, Willie Nelson. That's one I want to hear.
Oh.
You've heard Make Our Garden Grow, a duet with Jeff Bridges, and Send in the Clowns, a duet with Don McLean. Here is an email from Sarah. Actually, it's on Facebook. She says, I put my daughter to sleep every night for almost 2 years when she was a baby with Judy Collins' Baby's Bedtime CD playing in the background.
Yes.
I could sing that entire CD by heart for years afterwards.
I loved making that. There were two of them. There was Baby's Bedtime and Baby's Morning. And my daughter-in-law used to say, they're the best records you've ever made.
And are they still available?
They are. You can get
I'm
them.
so glad.
Laser Light or something is, but you can just go online and go to YouTube,
Amazon or
something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can get them.
Here's an email from Beth who says, Diane, what a delicious show with Judy Collins. I want to tell her she gave me one of the best days of my life. She was on the TV show Girls, and I was her stand-in.
Oh,
It was in the wonderful Cafe Carlisle.
yes, it was.
I witnessed Lena Dunham hearing Judy for the first time. Lena ran out of the room, gasping for air, saying, she sounds like an angel. And you do, Judy. I was so honored to stand on your stage to provide everyone eyeline in your stead.
Oh, that's so funny.
Thank you, she says,
But you
for
know,
enduring.
oh, enduring. That's it. You know, we just have to keep going. It's
keep
amazing.
going.
It's
We
amazing.
Keep going.
And that was such a thrill for me. Lena is such a wonderful woman. And as she was running out the door saying, you sing like an angel, I was saying, stop, honey, where are you going? Because she ran out in the middle of a song. So that was on television. That was on her show. And then the next season, that last year, the end of Mad Max, they played Both Sides Now. So I always say, I mean, my version, I always say that now my nephews and nieces know what I do for a living.
I want to hear the duet with Willie Nelson. Tell me about this one.
This is a song by a writer named Dave Carter, whom I never met. I never knew him, but died about 2004. I think it's a magnificent song.
It's titled
It's
When
I Go.
I Go.
Come, lonely hunter, chieftain and king, I will fly like the falcon when I go. Bear me, my brother, under your wing, I will strike, fell like lightning when I go. I will billow like the thunder drum, invoke the storm of war, twisting the spur of dust and blood from the prairie floor. I will sweep the foe before me like a giggle out on the snow, and the wind will all recount the story, reverence and glory when I go.
Spring spirit dancer, nimble and thin, I will leap like coyote when I go. Tireless entrancer, lend me your skin, I will run like the gray wolf when I go. I will climb the rise at daybreak, I will kiss the sky at noon, raise my yearning voice at midnight to my mother in the moon. I will make the lay along the feet and draw the chorus slow, send this message down the wire and hope that someone wise is listening when I go.
From his red house in the east, he will find standing storm along my chimney, my reeds. He will send his morning messenger to strike the hammer below, and I will roll down uncountable in showers of rose and rubies when I go.
Oh, Judy.
Isn't that a beautiful song?
Just gorgeous.
Yeah. Willie sent me an email today saying we sang good together, huh? He He's the best. I just adore him. I've been on Farm Aid, and I think he does such wonderful things for the world. And what a great songwriter and singer, and still at it.
He was not on the banjo.
No, and I'm afraid to say I don't know who was on the banjo. We tried a number of different people, and then got somebody who did a beautiful job. And if I had a CD with me, I'd look at it. But it came out. The album came out 5-6 days ago. I have one copy at home.
Oh.
I couldn't get enough. They have to go to the record stores. I'm doing a bunch of book signings at Barnes and Nobles and in Washington D.C. here today, and I'll be in Chicago tomorrow. They have to have the CDs.
Of course, they have to have that. Well, it is a gorgeous song. Did you always, in your own mind, think of yourself as a singer? Or was there ever a time when you thought, I'll do something else?
Well, of course, I had to think, what am I going to do? A couple of times in my life, because I could always sing. I always sang. I always played the piano. Always performed. I had shows. But then in the 60s and 65, I lost my voice entirely singing. I couldn't do anything. That's when I found my teacher, and then he helped me.
How did you lose your voice?
What
happened?
Just from strain.
Strain.
Just because I was drinking and smoking and screaming and singing and getting on the buses and the planes and traveling all over the country. And then I found my teacher, but then the next thing that happened was that I began to have all these allergies, and I had to start having shots for them, and then I had to have, I had what's called a hemangioma on my vocal cord, and I couldn't sing. The last year of my drinking and my work, I had to cancel shows over and over and over again because I couldn't sing. And my doctor said to me, well, you're never going to sing again unless you have the surgery, which is a brand new. I thought that's what the guy on the phone was going to mention when he said lasers, because he said there's a new laser surgery. And this was 1977. I had to cancel everything, including the Muppet Show, and then go back to England and do the Muppet Show, thinking I'm never going to sing again after I get through this show. Took all the drugs I could figure out to make it work, and then came back and had the surgery. But he said, if you don't have the surgery, you won't ever sing again. If you do, there's a little chance that you might. And I lucked out. But I didn't sing professionally for about 1.5 years after that surgery.
Where did you have that surgery?
In New York.
In New York.
With a doctor who's now unfortunately gone, but Wiseman was his name. He's wonderful. Other people have had the surgery and not have had such good luck with it. So, I just count myself as being blessed because, it can happen to anybody, really.
After you knew you were going to be a singer, did you want to go through college?
Oh, no.
No.
No, I went to college for a year. But it was a very unpleasant situation. No, I already probably knew that there was something else for me and that I was probably going to wind up making music professionally. It's the only thing I knew how to do. My husband said, my ex-husband, my starter husband, I was calling, he said to me, we were living in Boulder. He was in school at the University of Colorado. I had a job filing papers after a lifetime, until I was 19, playing the piano, singing, playing with an orchestra, learning folk songs, performing at the shows, being on my radio. He said, why don't you get a job doing something you know how to do, which is sing? And so I got my father to get me an audition down at Michael's Pub in Boulder, Colorado. And the guy said, the kids love you, all these college kids, in this room filled with smoke. They were all drinking beer, but they stopped and listened to me. And he said, I'm going to hire you. 5 days a week.
Wow.
3 shows a night. All the beer you can drink. You didn't know what I was getting into.
Yeah.
And all the pizza you can eat. And he said, but I do want to tell you something. He said, I really hate folk music.
But he realized
But
that
he
his
realized-
customers.
That's right. Yeah.
liked
He
it.
was before I sang there and before I started my first hiring. I stayed there for about 3 months every night, except Sunday and Monday. I think I was off. And before that, he'd had barbershop quartets
Oh my.
and accordion players. You heard about the accordion player who leaves his accordion in the car, and he comes back and there are 4 accordions there. It's a terrible story. But you'll understand.
Judy, what's been the worst time in your life?
The worst time of my life, of course, was when my son committed suicide in 19. I think I've seen you before that. I mean, before that and after that. And of course, it's been a long recovery because you don't ever get over it. You don't ever get over it.
Never.
You get through it. And I've written a number of books. In fact, I think I was here on the show talking about one of those books. And I've written songs about it. I've gone to therapy. I now, when I do speaking engagements, in part thanks to you, Diane, because you helped to get the word out about these books. But when I do speaking engagements, often they are for suicide survival groups and for mental health groups. And that's something I do maybe 6 or 8 show programs a year that are for speaking engagements to raise money for that kind of organization. So I've tried to help people to get through it and to understand that it's a taboo, but it should be talked about and it should be educated about.
And you're listening to the Diane Rehm. I realize it's something you can never get over, but is there some place in you that understands what happened?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I think so. Suicide's a mysterious thing, of course, and not all of us have that as a sort of go-to place, but enough of us have it that my old friend Ed Schneidman, who started the first suicide prevention hotline in 1949, when everybody said to him, well, you can have a hotline, but you can't use the word suicide because people can't say that out loud. But he said it's never going to be a zero suicide world because life is too hard. But of course, there are things to do. There's therapy to have. People can become aware when a person in the family or in their friends group is having problems. And depression is a leading cause, of course, but anybody who's depressed does not kill themselves. It's a specialty unto itself, I think. But I do understand because I tried to kill myself when I was 14.
You did.
And yes, and who knows why? Depression, yes, certainly. And I've treated my depression my whole adult life with exercise, with the right diet, with, of course, stopping drinking didn't hurt. So I've always dealt with it because that's something that can come with the genetic package as well. So you have to be careful being born because you never know what you're going to run into that you're going to have to deal with.
But you also have to thank God
Oh, yes.
that you had the strength not to commit suicide.
Absolutely. And the person at most risk from suicide is the survivor, the closest survivor, the mother, the father, the wife. So we have to be particularly careful and we have to be vigilant and we have to determine that we are going to live.
And therefore, the last song we're going to hear, and so appropriate to our conversation, is Amazing Grace. Let's hear it.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed.
Judy Collins, you are my birthday gift.
Happy birthday, Diane.
Thank you.
You're such a beautiful, brilliant woman, and I'm so proud to have been with you for this hour on your birthday.
Thank you. And thanks all for listening. I'm Diane Rain.